Please note that this session will include a Q&A powered by Slido. To ask a question at any point during the presentation, log on to your Advertising Week app and select Microsoft Stage. Thank you, and please welcome the panelists.
All right.
I'm the sun. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Wow. Is this thing on? Everybody hears me okay? Thank you so much for joining us for this panel. I'm very excited about it. Welcome, everybody. My name is Evan Rutchik, and I am the General Manager of Ogury USA. For those of you that don't know who Ogury is, which I'm assuming is many of you, we are a technology company that specializes in mobile journey marketing. And what is mobile journey marketing, right? Mobile journey marketing is understanding all of the disparate signals on a mobile device and being able to understand user behavior across the entire device and activate against it as well, or engage users based on that as well. So I'm very excited about our panelists here today. All of our clients, all of them are our clients. Is that kind of, or soon to be, if not are, right, Chandra? Okay, good, just checking. It would be great. It would be great if you guys.
The sale, Evan. Yes,
yeah, right.
Exactly.
Just close the deal on the stage. Just drop the mic and go.
All right.
Good. Okay. Why don't you guys each introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about what you do and where you spend the most of your time on your mobile device. We can start with Greg.
Greg Johns. I lead digital for Canvas Worldwide. Got 5 offices around the country. I'm based in LA. Work on a little bit of everything, and I would say definitely spend a lot of time on my mobile device, sadly in the car.
Okay.
Are you allowed to do that?
No, not at all.
I'm sure there's a law about that. My name is Jess White, and I work at Initiative. That's a media agency within IPG Media Brands. And my job is a little bit odd. I look at audiences, which is a very general term, but it's basically looking at from strategic side of things when we're doing big plans for our global clients, so all markets, but then all the way through to activation, which then tends to be very localized, but based here in New York, and so we work with a lot of clients here.
I'm Travis Johnson. I started at Dentsu April this year and look after e-commerce and commerce across all the different brands, of which I think we've got about 25 agencies in the US. And prior to that, I was the global CEO of a mobile company called Ansible that was both media and the production side of things. And
where do you spend the most of your time on your mobile phone?
Oh,
You didn't
yeah.
ask it either, so.
So not in the car, thankfully, but actually mine's very much like communication, so Messenger, Viber, you know, I know that's a bit lame, but I think being Australian and you're constantly on the phone trying to connect with people overseas, so that's definitely one.
Yeah, so I'm just speaking to Jess via all these messages in Australian. And
in our special code.
Yeah, special code. And aside from that, basically a lot of entertainment stuff. So I still actually use it to consume content and watch television and do a lot of reading and Spotify. So I actually use it for entertainment.
Okay.
I'm Chandra Jawal Prasad. I'm the VP of Digital over at Dentsu X on Jaguar Land Rover. Where do I spend most of my time? I mean, I want to be honest and say dating sites.
That's fine. Respect.
Boom.
Does anyone do the same thing every day on their mobile phone?
No.
It changes constantly.
I will confess a recent habit. I started Candy Crush. And I know it's late in the game, but that is addictive. Someone told me.
I think they did pretty well.
Yeah.
I've heard about that one.
Yeah.
All right, great. So I'm sure you all agree that mobile isn't like any other media platform. It is very personal, right? The personalization of mobile and the proliferation of smartphones has resulted in a tremendous amount of data, but not all data is useful. In fact, bad data can be extremely detrimental to your business, costing U.S. companies over $3 trillion per year. It's a big number. However, you can prevent this waste by ensuring you only access quality data that understands the entire user's journey. You get the theme of this, the user journey. So how are you currently leveraging data for your clients or your businesses to reveal who your mobile users are and understand what their journey is? Travis, you're looking right at me.
So we at Dentsu, we acquired a business called Merkle for a few $1 billion a couple of years ago, and focused on building a platform called M1, and M1's all about basically taking PII data and layering it with other sources. So tying it to an individual as a real human, rather than focusing on matching cookies in best of capacity. So really, it's about taking that device ID, matching it to the human, and then understanding where they're going, what they're buying, what they're doing across those different data sources. So I think the acquisition by Dentsu, obviously by IPG with Axiom or whatever, is a big focus of agencies moving forward to try and join the dots and understand that journey, which isn't easy and accessible and possible for a lot of brands at the moment. So it costs a lot of money to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I would simply add that the direction that that's going in, I think it's as critical on mobile as virtually any, because we do have such a disparate amount of standards that it's going to have to be a people-based marketing approach. I mean, everybody's been talking about moving to that for a long time. Obviously, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, most of their market cap is built on being able to execute that approach better than everyone else. But that's something that Canvas we're moving into as well. I think it becomes so much more critical, and especially as I think some of the challenges to data fidelity continue to grow.
Yeah, and I think similarly, Greg, I think you're moving there. I think for Dentsu, to Travis's point, we're really using that M1 data as the backbone to really identify those consumers. So being in the auto space, and especially being in the luxury auto space, our audience is very small. And so we have to really qualify that audience before we even serve a single impression. And that's something that M1 is able to do for us. So we're using different data sources like IHS to find that consumer that's in market, and we can use that to then tie back to an actual audience profile that we have that's a real person. And it's very innovative. It's, I think, cutting edge, and it's really, again, just finding that complete user that is an actual human being.
What's funny is that it's just taken so long, right? So when phones came out and data got faster and people started downloading apps and smartphones and whatever, there was that promise of having that supercomputer in your pocket that would know where you went and what you did. But we ended up with all of these different silos that weren't talking to each other, and we never actually had that holistic view as to where consumers are going and what they were doing. So it's funny that it's taken us so long to actually get back to to fulfill on the promise of where mobile started. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's still a problem though. So data liberty is different depending on what market you're in. Also, the penetration of mobile is different depending on what market you're in. It's actually even more important in Asia. I think it's like 90% or something of penetration there. I think it's like 70% here at the moment. So the dependency is great for all markets, but then it varies. And then I think tying it really comes down to how much are those that control the mobile data component, whether that's an SDK, whether it's a tag, whatever it is, an app, mobile web, doesn't matter. Whoever's controlling that identification of the individual or the user in that instance, we need to be able to access it so we can join it to a household, or we can join it to a deterministic declared person. So someone who said, yes, that is me, and we can connect it across not just mobile devices, but then the entire consumer journey. And I think we're getting there, and to Trav's point, IPG has been developing that stack for a while, but we still depend on panel-based data to do the very high-level consumer journey, to understand the person journey, not just the mobile journey, but how that plays a role. And then it becomes the activation point in which how do we reach them in that mobile environment and micro moment. And I think it's still connecting those pieces as a strategic pillar and then the activation pillar that some of these tech platforms that agencies are working towards really need to solve for it. Yeah.
Awesome. So this sort of leads, all of you guys had similar answers that led to the same place, which is considering the human on the other side of the screen, or consider the human in general. So consumers today are mobile first, or as someone in a panel I heard yesterday, we should be thinking more consumer first. Mobile just happens to be the first thing, or one of the things they're spending more and more time on. I think in 2019, mobile outpaced TV in terms of time spent, things of that nature, which is pretty wild to me. But if you can understand the mobile journey of a user, you can identify the human behind that specific screen. Once you identify that human, you can engage with them effectively, but there are obviously many barriers, just as you sort of just illuminated a few of them, and blockers that get in the way. So outside of that, what are the biggest challenges you face with regards to connecting those dots between the disparate data points to really reveal who that consumer is and then activate properly? Because there's so many different silos, as you mentioned also. There's your data silo, there's your activation silo, and how do they sort of string together across platform? Chandra, why don't you kick us off with that one?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think some of those silos can easily be identified when understanding the consumer journey. Starting with audience first and then really diving in to understand what that audience is doing. There's not every person is using, to the point of what we were talking about before, not every audience is using mobile the same every day. So it's really understanding who are you going after and how are they using mobile. And it's such a personal device. It's really something that you're carrying with you 24 hours a day. You're going to sleep with it. You're waking up with it. And you're using it for personal use, for work use, and you have to understand how that consumer is using it. You don't want to interfere with how they're, if they're just using it for photos or talking to their mom or what have you. You have to be in the right place at the right time. So to get to my point, I think it's a combination of understanding that consumer journey as well as having the right creative to talk to the person at the right time and get them to engage.
I mean, I'll make a real trite statement here, which is the biggest challenge to connecting the dots is connecting the dots. And we've talked a little bit about.
Genius.
Yeah, thank you. And try to get on that.
Right there.
Exactly. No, I mean, we've talked about lack of standards, different standards between mobile web and app that have been with us for a while. Something that is becoming, I think, a greater challenge and potentially threat to everything that we're doing is that it does appear Apple is going to be taking the anti-advertising stance and going for data privacy as one of its key selling points to consumers. And we don't exactly know what that's totally going to mean for our ecosystem yet. So it potentially adds, I don't want to say another roadblock, but something else that we're all going to have to think about at the end of the day. I think the industry is making good strides to try to bring standardization here, but we still have a long way to go, even from a technical standpoint. And then, I think we were all talking earlier, that leads into the additional challenges when it comes to us as marketers and really the investment that we want to make in the logistics to do this right. It's a real challenge to stare in the face what it really means to do this well, what that cost, how you have to resource it. So all of these things, I think, are challenges that we're still trying to solve for.
Now, I'm going to ask you a follow-up on that. Is privacy a selling point in that sense? Will people flock more to Apple because they're inherently private, or do people want the choice to actually give their data for a value exchange, whether it's a goat for your farm or if it's actually relevant content or something?
I don't know.
That choice or not?
I don't think it's a consistent answer because on the one hand, you can look at Netflix and Spotify, where we're seeing people put their money down to avoid advertising, and on the flip side of that, everybody might say they want to do that, but the economics eventually just don't work. Advertising is still going to have to be a part of content, and I think it's not necessarily that Apple becomes totally anti-ad. It's going to be more, we're going to do ads our way.
Yeah.
See also Apple News, things like that.
Right.
So,
and there's that. And also, people tend to think of mobile as advertising, which equals banners and buttons and pre-rolls and all those sort of executions. But you've got to actually think about apps and content and the rest of it. So whilst Apple may be putting measures in place to give people more control over their privacy, they've also got this thing called an app store, and they make a hell of a lot of money out of it. And a lot of those those apps within the App Store are advertising driven and customer CRM related. So there's two sides to it. It's like Google, greater control over Chrome browsers, but they've got a fairly large business in the advertising side. So these companies are appealing to consumers on one hand, but recognizing the hand that feeds them on the other.
So bringing it back to data, all the bad data that exists out there. Jess, global head of audiences. Lots of responsibility evaluating through data. Right? How do you sift through bad data, and how do you truly understand what's valuable to you when you're understanding who these users are? lots in there. Unpack it all.
God, it is a bit like how long's a piece of string.
Yeah.
So, like, where's it coming from? Is it declared? What's the volume? Is it even scalable? You can get really quality data, but if it's not scalable, it actually becomes useless to you. So, I mean, we've got a whole host of things that we look at when we're building, you know, audience segments. I think it comes down to, you know, you tend to have a rule around, like, is there a 5-point or 8-point or a 2-point probability qualifier that says this is the number of matches that we've got across our keys to say that, yes, this is the person, or yes, that attribute goes against this person. And I think we kind of dig into a lot of anyone who says, oh, we've got audiences, particularly if we go into markets that are very much walled garden based, to say, you know, how are you qualifying that? What are those, what is your 5-point, what is your methodology to really say that, yes, this is that person? And
do you find a lot of transparency from your partners?
Oh, I could name one really big one that will never tell us. And they are going, well, just, yeah, well. Look, it is very, it depends on what their commercial model is and how dependent they are on the audience sale. So, again, I would just say it's more of a process we go through in order to be able to sift through those audiences. But we then again try to bring it back, and it's about consistency and being able to see relative trends sometimes, not just necessarily deterministic trends. So if you're looking at, if we're looking at consumer journeys or what's effective in how we're reaching those, sometimes it's also just about relativity. And we've actually noticed that we use location through mobile as a really good, consistent way for us to not only identify what audiences are doing, but actually close the loop as well. And so we look, and that's a more scalable way of kind of qualifying audiences and using mobile. But then you can get into the more nitty-gritty, which is very much app-based, and there's specialist mobile. You know, I'd say that there's still more mobile ad networks than there are any other ad networks, because it comes down to the specialty of the, you know, technology and the codes they have sitting in some of the apps.
But I think the lack of viewability and the prevalence of fraud is just horrifying. Like, even on Monday we saw Facebook, and I think it was maybe in this theatre, actually talk about, you know, all of the issues that they've had, and they're taking two-factor authentication data and adding it into my profile without any permission, any ability to turn it off. And then also they're saying that, you know, they got rid of, I think across all of their different platforms, 1 billion fake accounts. How many ads were marketers paying to run against all of those fake accounts, even if they're up for a day or a week or whatever? You know, that's one of the biggest, most resourced and funded and capable businesses that still has this massive issue. So when we talk about, you know, data integrity across some smaller players and more dubious, you know, it's a really scary proposition to understand the amount of money that marketers are wasting. Yet, you know, it's a constant fight. We can move one step forward and verify and block people off and whatever, but then they'll just come back better and smarter.
And that's why it comes down to people. It's people, not users. It's not like, it has to be people. So the more we can get back to that declaration, verified of who that person is, a lot of that other stuff starts to go away. But again, it's the scale.
And then,
but the walled gardens are the ones that are cleaning
up.
And that are marking their own homework and making the most money out of it. And then occasionally saying,
selling themselves into clients.
And what I was going to say is, in the end, even when we vetted all of the characteristics of the data, it's going to come down to performance. And, you know, really designing some kind of control test to make sure that, okay, not only is the data what you've said it is, but it's performing in the manner that we would expect it to. And, you know, in order to really verify that, it does come back to having that kind of people spine to make it, you know, really work. If it's not performing, then, you know, you start to call into the question the validity and all the above. And even all the vetting in the world, you know, you can still result in not getting what you paid for. So performance has to be a key at the end of the day.
And to your question, what's the challenge around some of this stuff before? I would say actually being able to track the conversion. So even if you've got, so, you know, you can take beauty or, you know, any transaction that's not happening within the client's owned world, owned space, we can't get that visibility. Like, you can't actually get that conversion in auto, as an example. Like, it's being sold somewhere else, and maybe the master brand actually doesn't have that visibility, and it's a long term before you get that data back. So yeah, it does come back to conversion at the end of the day, but it's the timing in which we can get it and what data we can pull through, and I think that's where location has come in handy for us.
Makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about the mobile journey and how it reveals the human or the people at the end of the screen that you're looking for. But today there's increasing mistrust from consumers over the ways in which their personal data is used, or data is used. Did I say that right?
Data.
Data, okay. With 71% of people thinking that ads are actually more intrusive today than they were 3 years ago, consumers now have very little tolerance for irrelevant or disruptive ads. So flipping this, you're all marketers, but as consumers, do you feel okay with what you guys are doing with all these people's data, with your own data? How do you feel about that? Greg, how do you feel?
I'm not doing anything that
the amount of
people
collection.
should be worried about. The amount of collection? All right. No, I'll say
No
this. People should be more educated and understanding in how this all works. Not even just from a technical standpoint, but the idea that we're collecting data. We, as marketers, have a responsibility to our brands and to our industry to use this data to benefit consumers. And we understand, and we're all very well aware, that there have been a proliferation of bad actors out there. Our responsibility in our own ecosystem is to continue to work together and do things like open measurement SDK, standards that we can all get behind and build common platforms to make this better. I know that a lot of people talk about blockchain is the elixir that is going to fix all. Who the hell knows? I don't yet. But that said, it's going to be those types of things that will continue to kind of build trust amongst ourselves and ultimately to consumers too. We need to do a better job of educating that.
Okay.
I think on the flip side too is, I feel okay with using data, because what it's doing is it's allowing us to hone in on those folks that are going to be the most relevant for our brands, right? So taking the luxury space, for example, we're not knocking on every single door. We're using data to understand who are those consumers that make sense, that are going to be in that demographic, that can afford our products and things like that. So without all of that data, we wouldn't be able to hone in and be able to knock on those right doors.
Do you as a consumer feel okay with that as well on your side? Do you
I
find the
absolutely
value
do.
as a consumer as well?
I do. I when I'm shopping on Macy's and I see these shoes that I want traveling around the internet with me until I finally buy them, I understand how that's happening. And 10 years ago, that
And
could
once
have been,
you've bought them, do you want to buy the second and third
Yeah, I was
pair
gonna
for the
say,
next 3 weeks?
before-
then that's where we come in, right? I think that as marketers, we have to have that out a little bit. We have to say that if we're seeing this person take the action we want them to do, whatever that KPI may be, there has to be an out. They can't keep getting the same message over and over again. I'm not going to say the same thing to you over and over again, except if it's rise up lights, right? But
Got it in there, well done.
yeah, I got it in there. You owe me $5. But I think that's what it is we have to understand our consumer. It goes back to the consumer journey, and it has to just be fair. It's a relationship that we're having with these people.
But what's interesting is that I think the Edelman Trust Barometer, so the study that they do each year, so the US is feeling it more than anybody else. So we've probably got the most liberal and open privacy and data, and everybody's just it's Wild West a bit, slightly controlled, but Wild West, and consumers are responding to it. So we went from out of 28 countries in the world, from number 6 most trusted. Having trust in corporations in 2017 to last at number 28 out of 28 in 2018. So obviously driven out of the election and fake news and all of these sort of things, but people are very mindful about privacy and what it all means, and it's going to have an impact, and that impact might be slightly delayed, but it's going to hurt.
Sure. State by state starting to pass their own individual laws to combat that.
Yeah.
At Ogury, what you mentioned about educating at Ogury, we feel strongly in providing consent options to the consumer, right? Giving them the chance to say, yes, I'm okay with providing you my data in an effort to get value back, which would be more relevant content in some form, from whoever. And GDPR and being a global business has a huge impact on that. I know you guys all operate in some global business as well, but from a contextualization standpoint, talking about when does that ad relevant to you, how do you balance relevancy with, or using data, being as personalized and as relevant as possible, with scale? That's obviously a big issue. Travis, let's throw this one to you, being the commerce guy.
I mean, scale on a global basis is hard because the laws are different in different countries, and there were suppliers and partners that we had in Europe that have literally shut their doors as GDPR came in. It was just going to be too expensive and too hard for them to be compliant, so they're like, no, we'll just focus on US and other countries around the world. So the whole consistency layer is very challenging, but I guess just we and clients need to have certain minimum standards that we comply to, or else it can hurt.
Sure, but then tying it to a creative and data collection and being extremely focused and personal, because I think we'd all agree that the more one-to-one you can get with the message that makes sense for that consumer, the more better performance, more conversions, et cetera, more purchases, more cars that you would be able to sell. It's a sweet spot.
Yeah, and I think
how do you balance
a big role?
How do you balance the quality of the data that you're using with the scale to make sure you're getting?
Well, I also think that that's been a promise that we've been making to consumers for a long time, and every single year, if you just look at Amazon eating the world, that promise becomes a reality. Consumers, it is more of an expectation. There is obviously, I think, an expectation from consumers now, up and down the age spectrum, that experiences are going to be personalized for them. I mean, Amazon is moving to a world where they're going to order things for you before you need them, and they are going to arrive, and you will send back what you don't need. That's already happening. So,
Alexa's always listening.
Yeah, exactly. So, I do think that that personalization need will continue. I do think that also, again, it's education for consumers to understand there is a value exchange there. Ad blocking, yeah, I understand. Ads can be intrusive, but I don't agree with the idea that you continue or should continue to receive content for free without having to give that value exchange. So, publishers that want to block that is the type of thing that I do support. They are a business. They need to be able to make money. Customers, consumers, and they need to understand that this is an exchange. And I do think that year in, year out, you do see more consumers understanding that a little bit better and realizing, okay, there is value to giving this data. I just want to know what I'm doing and what you're doing with it.
But I just
where it ends up as well.
Yeah.
So, if I've signed on with a particular app or website, and then it's using that information over here, that linkage isn't clear to me. I think that
of course not.
A lot of that is where people are concerned. If I've had certain actions within Instagram and clicked on these certain ads or have like these things, I'm okay with that being used within that environment. But if it's used over here, then I'm wary and I'm scared. Yeah.
Do you think consumers are that savvy that they know that that's all happening?
I think people do. I think people do get surprised.
Sorry,
no, you're doing great.
I think people do get scared and surprised when there are, super clever targeting tactics, and we go, "Isn't that awesome?" And that freaks them the hell out.
Right. I think Facebook was a big one there, because obviously a lot of off Facebook activity showed up in the newsfeed with respect to your browsing. And sorry, I interrupted, Jess.
That's okay.
How often who's noticed that they're constantly being asked to be tracked by their apps, their location? Who's seen an increase in that? Yeah. And for apps that do not need to know your location.
Yeah.
It's the same as when, Google started kicking you out of your Gmail all the time. They're all moves for businesses because they've realised, oh, that's my connective tissue. That's my connective tissue to ad-funded, ways of identifying the person and targeting them.
Yeah, I mean, it seems.
And I don't think,
It just
you
seems
don't
like
realise it's happening.
No, you're right. I mean, but
And
it
you're like,
does
"Oh,
seem
shit."
like there's a balance between consumers wanting personalization and consumers being freaked out by personalization also,
Yeah.
right? But there is that value exchange that's required.
just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should, and doesn't mean it's going to reflect well
Unless,
on the
of course,
actual
the
brands that we're
consumer
selling.
is aware and knows what they're getting.
And this is why GDPR's come up, because it's going, okay, guys, this is a way for us to communicate and give people a chance to understand that, hey, I'm going to give some data up for something. It's a strong step in a direction that will actually maintain an ad economy rather than it, just being completely obliterated.
And part of the law is providing information as to where that data goes, how it's used.
Correct.
Et cetera.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. I did promise not to talk too much about GDPR, so I apologize for that. As we've discussed today, consumers are extremely smart and understand the value exchange. Wow, words right off the sheet. With sharing their data to receive more personalized recommendations. But this personalization and value can only be delivered if marketers connect the dots. So what metrics do you think matter most when it comes to connecting the dots to mobile user behavior? Jump ball, anybody?
What are the metrics that
Sure, what
matter
metrics
most?
matter? So when you're looking at, to understand, I think it ties back to conversions and whatnot, right? How are you understanding what users are doing in one environment and tying it back to another?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that mobile should be in a silo, that there are mobile metrics. I think that there should be metrics that are captured by all channels. So for example, and I'm sorry, I'm in auto, so I go back to auto. But in auto, we have 8 specific actions on site that we're meant to drive, and all channels should be responsible for driving those, whether you're display, mobile, TV, things like that. And it goes back to, mobile should be a part of the digital strategy that leads into an overarching go-to-market strategy. We shouldn't be looking at things in silo. Do you want me to answer?
No, you're
a
fine.
Specific mobile metric?
No,
I think
answer how you
being
feel.
able to track and then see where conversions are landing cross-app is something that we're missing, and then something that we'd love to get a better handle on. I think that's
Within a single device?
just, so one person, what are they doing across app? I think that is still a little bit of a dark space, and not always picked up, particularly when it's not an owned asset by the client.
Right. Or one of those apps is Facebook or
Or
Google.
it's a walled garden of some kind. Like that.
Yeah.
That is definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
So then you have to come up with other metrics, and I don't want to sound like a broken record,
Well,
but we've used
one company that can
location.
solve that for you. This whole second row.
Okay. Gave you a bone.
Thank you very much. So,
It's Chandra's point. It's not just even cross app. It's cross everything that
exactly.
does matter. It's my stupid statement, connecting the dots, the hard part. So performance. I also think that especially even beyond just the conversion, we're focusing more and more on how attention, time spent, times amount of real estate that a particular advertising message is taking up on any given screen. Kind of seeing the correlations between those metrics and how that ends up into a store visit or a sale, if you're able to get that type of feedback loop. Those are really some of the most important things that I think we're really starting to get our hands around. And again, the hard part is, am I able to put the infrastructure in place to be watching how a CTV exposure over here potentially impacted mobile behavior, potentially impacted a location visit, and oh, by the way, I'm in auto too, did they buy a car, for example?
speaking of infrastructure, different, but wireless infrastructure, how's 5G going to change the way that you address consumers? Is that going to make an impact?
It's
Greg?
all going to be the same stuff, just going to happen a lot faster.
More data available?
I mean, it'll be interesting because certainly the data pipes that come through a household in large capacity, that potentially becomes the realm of an AT&T or a T-Mobile in the not too distant future. And so that could bring a much greater wealth of information that gets tied into other mobile activity. It's also, I think, going to drive more activities through the mobile space than you're seeing now. Sure, there's a lot of video that's watched on mobile now, but we're entering a phase where there will be lag-free video. the 3 seconds that people bailed out of an ad because it was waiting to load theoretically goes away. So I think it's a wonderful development for our industry. I think that it also, you think about something like location data where you're pinging now and again to measure location. If you want a privacy concern, theoretically that could be an always-on location tracker because the bandwidth of 5G now exists. So I think it does portend good things for the industry. It'll be interesting to see what they are.
So, but also there could be some bad impacts on the industry as well, because if everything's loading much faster, you no longer have the tension between publishers who want their pages to load quickly and don't want tags and SDKs and the rest of it. If everything works really, really fast, you're going to have 300 redirects and people in the value chain along the way, and all these different ad tech companies and all the rest of it by the time your actual page loads. So can you imagine the tags that are going to be embedded in every website and the SDKs and every single app moving forward?
And I reckon this is the biggest, before we even get to personalization, we can do all the personalization we want when it comes to media, but if we can't get the ad to load or the consumer doesn't see it because they get so frustrated that their content's not loading and then the ad's not loading, they just leave the page. And I think one of my biggest pet hates is, and I won't name the news site, but whenever I go on there, I cannot get to the news content because there's so much ads coming up and popping up, and then they don't load properly. Then you get to see the ad and then there's no content behind it. And I think with the whole thing around ad blocking and that sort of thing, and I know Google's starting to make some changes around, they're making the move towards, if you want your search results to come up, you have to have customized your mobile site to make sure that those ads are working properly. I think all those things are going to be more interesting to watch, and will probably change the way we interact with mobile advertising than just the speed of it. We need to be able to get that asynchronization between the ads loading and content loading, because time and time again I see that fail on mobile.
Awesome. Okay, we have a few minutes left. We have a couple questions from the audience. I don't know if they show up on the screen or not, but I'll read them right here. I get to choose. Okay. What are the strongest, best mobile signals you are seeing or using for finding audiences across mobile for your client?
What's that?
Chandra. Number 2 right there.
What are the best
Oh, it's in red now.
mobile signals? Well, I think the obvious is location. I think that's a huge mobile signal that we take advantage of, whether on any client, especially auto, going into dealership, understanding where they are. I would also say...
Nothing about the mobile user journey?
Yeah, that too.
Okay. This is devolving very quickly. Sorry. All right. Let's see. Greg, you spoke on attention and screen time. How do you see NLP, natural language processing, changing the landscape and podcasting?
I wonder if this came from a podcasting person. So, interesting context for this. I mean, I would presume insofar as natural language processing changing things that, we want to add more context to environments than necessarily some of what we're able to do now, which is either classifying pages or environments based on an overall context. So I would say that if we're able to get a bit more detail on environment, it's going to help us increase relevancy, in theory. The problem that we'll run into, I think, is that there is kind of an upper limit to the amount of customization that one can necessarily do. Upper limit many times is not even technology. It's a production budget, or it's other factors that come into play. I do think that we're talking about podcasting. It's been wonderful insofar as it is a great medium for attention, and especially if the advertising is done right. Within podcasts, they've been very effective so far. There's a scale issue there that we still have to get forward, but overall I'm bullish on the space, and I think there's more that machine learning will be able to do for us down the road.
Travis and Jess, last thoughts, any topic you'd like.
Wild card.
All right,
Kept
10.
looking at the, oh, it's not on there anymore. Someone asked what are two things about transparency, two examples, transparency that ad companies aren't giving, tech companies. I've seen recently, or not just recently, ongoing tech platforms, so enterprise tech platforms, they claim you really, like people-based marketing is a real buzzword, but there's a very big difference between true people-based marketing and then when it's a user ID as opposed to an actual person. So I would just say, if you're talking to anyone that's talking about tech or audiences, really get into how they're declaring a person. And not saying that it's a bad thing, you know, user IDs provide scale, it still provides some connectivity, but you just got to understand that journey and how that, you know, duplicates. So I would say that's one big example I've seen. And then, actually it all links back to that. I would always ask that.
And I'll just agree with Jess.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks, Trev.
All right, well.
That never happens, so
Yeah,
can
right.
we just like record that?
These
You guys
Aussies
from the
stick
same
together.
town? No, I'm kidding. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining me up here. I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please exit towards the stage